The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, seems to be taking aim at the White House as part of the reason why the UK economy unexpectedly went backwards last month, only by a touch, but by 0.1%. I say unexpected. There were market forecasters and traders looking at spreadsheets and making calls based on the data, and their expectations were that the UK economy would increase in January. But I think that anyone who works in retail, anyone who runs a small business, or anyone who works in hospitality could have told them very confidently that things were heading in the wrong direction. Rachel Reeves is suggesting that Trump's tariff schedules and the trade wars are impacting the UK economy. No doubt they will have an effect, but currently there aren't any tariffs directly applied on the UK, and there weren't during the month of January. So is the Chancellor spinning the Trump line to cover for the decisions she has made that have had a terrible effect on the UK economy, specifically as unemployment data out this week suggested on jobs? Does number 10 agree with number 11, that Trump's changes are responsible? We'll speak to the chief economist at KPMG in just a moment. First, LBC's political correspondent Aggie Chambre is here with the details. Aggie.
Well, Tom, the Office for National Statistics blames the weather and, more importantly, I suppose, a weak performance in the manufacturing and construction sectors for this contraction. But, as you say, the Chancellor has someone else she wants to blame. She said this morning the world has changed, and across the globe we are feeling the consequences. That's why we're going further and faster to protect our country, reform our public services and kickstart economic growth to deliver on our plan for change.
I believe, this government believes, in free and open trade and will continue to make that point. We are in negotiations at the moment for an economic agreement with the United States to try and ensure that British exporters are supported to export all around the world, including to the United States.
Now, Tom, what is it about the world that has changed recently? Could it be President Trump entering the White House and the escalating global trade war he started? Well, that very much seemed to be her implication. But when Downing Street were asked later that day, today, were asked if the US president was at fault for this contraction, the PM spokesperson said no. He said, "We know the cost of living crisis is not over and this government is determined to make people better off. And that's why economic growth is the Prime Minister's number one priority." Well, it may be the government's number one priority, but it's difficult if the Chancellor is essentially saying this is Donald Trump's fault and Downing Street is saying, no, it is not. So we are in slightly difficult territory. Now, usually, I should say, Labour does blame the Tories instead of Donald Trump. They blame the Tories and the inheritance that they have got. But the Tories today are saying this is all Rachel Reeves' fault.
Nobody wants to see the economy shrinking, but that is what is happening in this January number. And of course, that's on the back of very disappointing data on growth for the last quarter of last year. And that's what you get when you have a government that is taxing the living daylights out of business and talking down the economy.
That was Mel Stride, the Shadow Chancellor. Now, Tom, we are, as you know, 12 days away from the spring statement where increased borrowing costs and weak economic growth are likely to require spending cuts. And we are a month from seeing the true impact on business and jobs from employment tax rises in the October budget, which will come at the start of April. This could see businesses raise prices and slash jobs. Now, we expect next week to see welfare reform announced, something else Reeves is keen to get a grip of. Tricky times, as always, ahead.
Aggie, appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. Aggie Chambre, LBC's political correspondent. Let's turn to Yael Selfin, who's chief economist at KPMG UK. Thank you for coming on the programme, Yael. To what extent can this UK data be put down to what's happening in the White House?
Well, we were looking at the January numbers. In January, it was still the early days, really. So you could say some of it will be due to the uncertainty triggered by the US. We'll probably see more of that in the data in the months to come, as we see more of the GDP numbers. Part of it would be just a little bit of a, if you like, a correction from a relatively strong December figures. Part of it would be, if you remember, at the back end of last year, businesses were relatively disappointed with some of the announcement in the autumn budget, with a number of costs, especially labor costs, coming up shortly. So I think that was probably more dominant at that stage rather than the new administration in the US, which is now dominating the picture.
I suggested Yael, that there are people who are out there in the sort of bricks and mortar economy, working in their shop or serving in their hotel or their bar or whatever, who can see what's happening here. Or they run a small business trying to employ people. They can see that this is heading in a particularly bad direction, and it's not necessarily because of anything Trump has done yet.
Yes, I guess you are right. Although, to caveat that, I'd say that the uncertainty triggered by some of the measures that were announced by the new administration in the US is impacting the overall sentiment and will have a potential very significant impact on the UK economy if tariffs are going to be announced the way they are looking likely. So there's still quite a lot of headwinds potentially for all those people who may not have felt it so far.
What would you do if you were Chancellor to try and boost growth?
So I think one of the things that businesses need at the moment is longer term certainty. I would be less worried about any potential downward revision to forecast that the OBR may announce
Can you imagine that? Yeah, as they say, the spring, sorry to interrupt, 12 days' time, the OBR, turns out, forecast for growth has dropped again. There is no headroom. That's a disaster for the Chancellor, absolute disaster.
Not necessarily. What you need to bear in mind is that forecasts go up and down all the time. There'll be plenty of factors that will impact a forecast, and a forecast is just a forecast. It doesn't necessarily mean that the budget won't be met, because we could have an upside and then there will be more room. So it is unfortunate that she has got a very tight room to maneuver with, which means that even a small change in the forecast makes it difficult for her to deliver. But I think generally the best thing is to have a solid medium-term plan of investments that gives businesses a direction of where to go, rather than chop and change every time there is a jump in numbers.
All right. We'll see what happens. Yael, thank you. Yael Selfin, Chief Economist at KPMG UK. Here's Andrew in Fulham. Tom, I'm really glad you're covering this today. It is simply staggering, says Andrew, that the Chancellor is surprised by this recent economic data. Most business owners know the economy is tanking, largely because of the Chancellor's budget. Yet she is now blaming global events. Nearly every business survey has told her that jobs tax will negatively impact growth. At the same time, government and businesses are laying off thousands of people to save costs. So where are all these jobs for people coming off benefits going to be found? Rachel Reeves, says Andrew, is being disingenuous with the British people, and her constant surprise at the economic data proves she does not know what she's doing.